China and Africa have hit a milestone in trade. Beijing has eliminated tariffs on goods from all African nations it has diplomatic ties with. In this edition of Global South Voices, we bring together journalists and experts from China and Africa to understand the historic move.
Expectations across the board, from farmers to exporters, are rising.
The bridge between Somali coastline and the Chinese market is open for business.
This is win-win cooperation in action.
Plus, what it means for both sides and a world shaken by tariffs and wars. Hello there, I'm Kasturi Manikam. Our top story this hour, China's zero tariff policy on imports from all 53 African countries which have diplomatic relations with it has taken effect. Under this policy, the first shipment of 24 tons of fresh South African apples has cleared customs in Shenzhen in South China. The policy previously covered 33 African countries classified as least developed countries. It now covers 20 more African nations not classified as LDCs. China has been Africa's largest trading partner for the past 17 years. Now, China has fostered strategic trade ties with African countries under the Forum on China-African Cooperation, which was founded back in 2000. Ida Waringa now joins me with a breakdown of economic trade development between China and Africa under the Forum. Ida?
Thanks, Gus. Now, in 2005, China implemented a zero tariff policy for products from 25 least developed countries in Africa. In 2024, Beijing expanded that to 33 nations. And this year, China is implementing the policy to all 53 African countries that have diplomatic relations with Beijing. Now, that initial zero tariff policy 2 decades ago covered 190 products, including agricultural and aquatic products. The 2026 policy covers all raw materials and products coming to China from Africa. Now, back in 2000, China's trade with Africa stood at $10.6 billion. In 2025, that had risen to over $348 billion, representing a 33-fold increase. In the same year, China's exports to Africa totaled $225 billion, while imports from Africa stood at $123 billion. Now, this duty-free policy is also expected to reduce the trade deficit between China and African nations. 2025 IMF report illustrated the benefit of China-Africa trade to the continent, saying that it contributes 1 to 2 percentage points to Africa's economic growth annually. And beyond the zero tariff policy, China has implemented several programs to support China-Africa trade. These include bilateral agreements on economic partnership for shared development. Additionally, China has established green lanes, which expedite the clearance of agricultural products, and it also organizes major trade exhibitions. I spoke to the chief economist at the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, Maximo Torero. We discussed the significance of China's zero tariff policy.
China is doing by eliminating tariffs to basically all Africa, with the exception of Eswatini, is that they are opening markets to them, and they are allowing, of course, to increase and have China as a demander, as a big demand that they can supply. It's also a need that Africa needs to enforce their food safety standards so that they comply with the requirements of China as an importer country, which is a huge importing country. So for China, it's a good way to diversify the sources of what they import. And for Africa, it's an enormous opportunity to increase their exports towards Africa. I see this more as an opportunity. Basically, in terms of the world, what is happening is that the trade world is becoming very complex. It's a world that is changing every day because tariffs are put in every country every day, and they are different. 1 week we could have a set of tariffs, the next week the second set of tariff. The result of that is that we are splitting this global spaghetti ball of trade, and we are opening segmented spaghetti balls, smaller ones. And this is one of the cases, where China and Africa are trying to link more in terms of trade, rather than being part of this global picture of the global spaghetti ball of trade relationships.
Now, it was a very insightful conversation. As you can hear, Gus, the potential impact of this policy is global. It's back to you.
You're absolutely right, Ida, and a win-win cooperation for both sides. Thank you for your live report. Now, exporters across Africa are gearing up to increase their production for the Chinese market. In Kenya, the avocado sector is seeking to scale up further. Victor Moyakani from TV47 explores how industry players are responding to the expanded market access.
Demand for avocados is growing in China, driven by a rising health-conscious consumer base. For Kenya, this represents a significant opportunity for one of its fastest-growing export sectors. Kenya's avocado sector and avocado industry has been growing rapidly, and with greater access to markets like China, expectations across the board from farmers to exporters are rising.
A reason why we export avocado is that it's most profit venture. Once you plant, every year you get harvest.
But translating that opportunity into real income is not always straightforward. Beyond the farm, exporters and supporting industries are also positioning themselves to scale up.
Previously, we have had situations whereby our fruits are uncompetitive as opposed to Peru and other exporters of the least developed countries that enter China tariff-free. So most of the exporters today, despite the other challenges that are there, they will be happy to get into the Chinese market.
The real impact of this shift may not just be felt on the border or at the borders. It will be felt within the value chain, in who is able to meet standards, access markets, and harvest the value.
So this is a big boost for avocado exporters in Kenya and particularly East Africa in total. Already Kenya is the 6th largest exporter of the fruits. In the next 3 years, we are going to have double the harvest what we are doing today. So we need a market, a big market where this produce will move at ease. So this is one of the growth and scale which is good for the economy.
But whether that translates to real gains will depend on how much value remains in the country. Victor Moyakani, TV47 for CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Somalia is ramping up its marine export sector infrastructure to supply the world's largest consumer market. Abdigani Abdullahi from the Somali National News Agency files this report.
The Indian Ocean coastline of Somalia represents one of the most resource-rich, untapped maritime zones in the world. For generations, the Mogadishu fish market has operated as the beating heart of the local economy. Every morning, vessels return with a premium catch of tuna, mackerel, and lobster.
I operate out of the Hammerwinds fish market. Our catch is abundant, peaking between October and April. Even with the basic equipment, our yields are massive.
The local industry is rapidly scaling its infrastructure, moving from a small craft fishing to organized commercial supply chains. The leadership managing the transition understands that access to global market is the ultimate objective.
With proper international access, the daily yield can easily scale to thousands of kilograms. The announcement of the zero tariff policy by China is a massive breakthrough. China has historically supported Somalia's infrastructure and development, and this initiative will generate immense economic momentum.
The federal government is moving aggressively to secure these trade routes and guarantee a highly lucrative environment for foreign direct investment.
Previously, Somali seafood reached China through complex indirect channels via third-party nations. Our strong diplomatic ties have now secured a direct corridor, heavily incentivizing local fishermen and international investors.
Mogadishu is no longer a domestic market. It's a critical node in a massive transcontinental supply chain. As zero tariff policy takes effect on 1st of May, the bridge between Somali coastline and the Chinese market is open for business, promising economic growth for the Horn of Africa. Abdigani Abdullahi Sona for CGTN.
African media representatives say the duty-free policy will not only promote trade growth and create jobs, but also boost collaboration among the nations of the Global South.
As the Chief Executive of Ghana News Agency, I see this as a catalyst for trade growth, industrialization, job creation, and economic diversification. And this will foster value-added processing and integration into the global supply chains, which form part of the long-standing China-Africa ties through FOCAC since 2000.
The policy gives Ethiopia a useful buffer at a time of tighter global trade conditions and shifting access to other markets. But the early evidence still suggests the biggest gains are concentrated in a few export categories. So the broader payoff will depend on whether Ethiopia can expand value-added exports and logistics capacity.
It demonstrates evidence that China takes relations with the continent absolutely seriously. China has shown that when China succeeds and survives, it will do so along with the rest of the South-South nations, and thereby improving also the South-South relations in the world.
In the West African country of Gambia, small and medium-sized enterprises play a crucial role in the economy. Janaba Sonko from GOtv Gambia explores what local businesses need to do to fully benefit from China's duty-free policy.
China's zero-tariff policy on imports from countries like the Gambia has evolved over several years. But while the policy framework is expanding, its impact on small businesses in the Gambia is still taking shape.
Since 2017, China has granted a 0% tariff treatment for about 97% of tariff lines for Gambian exports. Now, this got better in 2024 when the coverage was expanded to 100%. But turning access into actual trade remains a complex process.
Entrepreneurs like Fatuma Tanjai are welcoming the development, even though she is not export ready.
I've always had the intention to export my products to China. I once attended an exhibition there, which broadened my interest. With this opportunity that is in hand, this will allow us to showcase Gambian products internationally, give opportunities to farmers, especially the women farmers that we work with.
Despite the growing interest, many small and medium-sized enterprises remain at an early stage of export readiness.
When you do export, it requires a lot of logistics arrangements, and we all know the AFTA is there, but it's not sufficient. Even if we want to export, we don't have the capacity to export, and also the standards are not properly defined.
Beyond immediate trade, the policy could also support the Gambia's long-term economic transformation. By opening access to a major market, it creates incentives for businesses to move beyond raw exports toward value addition, such as processing and packaging.
To be able to make the best use of this opportunity, it has to be a deliberate attempt by government through policy, legislation, and regulation. Whereas government would identify businesses with the capacity or have borderline capacity to export and have a deliberate policy initiative to support them so that they can fulfill that export potential.
Janaba Sonko for CGTN.
Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria, wants to increase its exports to China. The country's national television network, NTA, took to the streets for CGTN and asked Nigerians about their expectations.
By the time the tariff is removed out of the system, it will boost my business. The money you have to pay on tariff will now be brought back to be invested in your business.
It will help the business and manufacturers around the country to be able to produce and export and make more gain and boost the business the more.
The quality of what we are going to export must be a standard, so that at the end of the day, nobody will tell you it's like this, it's like that. Because what they are after over there is quality, not because you have in excess. You are looking for where to go to come and dump it.
I want to speak to Hamin Hamadi, Chief Analyst at the African Chamber of Commerce. and lecturer at Shanghai University of Finance and Economics. Mr. Hamadi, thank you for joining us on the show. You're from Algeria. From your perspective, how do you think the zero tariff policy will impact the continent?
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I think the initiative is very interesting overall for the African economy. It also shows the interest of China to support the African development. In the past years, we can see that also China is welcoming more and more imported products through the China International Imports exhibition that has been running since 2018. We could see how many foreign enterprises are actually interested in the Chinese market. And Chinese markets is large enough to attract most of the investors or producers overseas to export to China. So now the opportunity comes to Africa, and we can see with the free tariff regulation or policy, we can see that now it's an opportunity for African economy to take over this opportunity and try to stimulate their exportation toward China. So this outcome could be seen from different perspectives. At the moment, we can see that most of the African exports are actually raw materials, or at least low added value products from Africa toward China. On this side, definitely there will be a stimulation where the prices will be, or the costs will be lower for the Chinese industries, and that will stimulate the export. Knowing that Africa having a deficit, a trade deficit with China that goes till $100 billion in the past year. So such policy could at least help Africa to stimulate the exports and try to reduce this trade deficit to some points. On the other side, we could also see that a part of the exportations come from agriculture or from agricultural products. Now, in this situation, we can see that Africa has not been using its full capacity in the agriculture industry. So with such policy that can also stimulate the production, can support the African producers to create more production or create more job opportunities and try to export their products more toward China. Given Algeria as an example, Algeria is also trying to support exportation and try to support exports toward all over the world. So now with this opportunity, I think it's a very, very interesting part for Algeria to try to stimulate their export. Knowing also that all African countries in the past 10, 20 years, they tried to take China as an example. And now with China giving them an opportunity to export their products with a free tax, I think the capacity of production, stimulate the economy can be a great opportunity for the African economies.
Right. Now, Mr. Hamadi, allow me to quote a 2025 IMF report which says that Chinese investment across Africa has increased average processing rates significantly over the last decade. What effect do you think the policy will have on industrialization?
Yeah, actually, what I just have said could be an immediate impact on the economy. But in terms of investments, we could see it as a long-term impact. Chinese investments in Africa actually matches with the Chinese policy of going out, which is in Chinese a 走出去. So we have seen that in the past 20 years or after 2000, we have seen a growing or an increasing investment or foreign direct investment in Africa. But unfortunately, that most of these investments were all toward raw materials and infrastructure. Only 14 or 13% of these investments were manufacturing. So now, with this kind of policy, I think Africa will gain more in terms of investment attraction. Now, more and more investors will think that Africa is a place to invest, is a place that I can produce in Africa and export to China. On the other side, we can also see that the Chinese businesses can also try to think about shifting their production or their small production from China or from other places toward Africa. Not only to satisfy the local market, because local markets may not have the high demand it's required by the Chinese investors, but on the other side, they can get back their investments by exporting their products to China.
Mr. Hamadi, I would like to thank you for your perspectives and for your time. Leaders and scholars across Africa say the duty-free policy is a timely and inclusive initiative that can help boost the continent's industrialization.
The world is passing through difficult times with numerous crises, and the most critical one is the war in Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. These have disastrous effect on African economies, and protection is growing everywhere. So the decision of His Excellency President Xi to allow African products to enter the Chinese market with zero tariff is very timely.
I think it will accelerate the industrialization process in our country and also Africa in general. We want to add value to our products, being it minerals or agricultural, so that we can become more relevant to the Chinese economy, but also to the global economy.
It is inclusive, it has a continental inclusivity. That means for all African countries, and it is predictable, it's predictability and without conditions. So that is a great benefit for the African countries.
At China's Dalian port, the landmark African Simandou iron ore project is already reaping early dividends of the new zero tariff policy. Guanyang has more.
For years, the port of Dalian has been a key gateway for African bulk cargoes in northeast China. Now, a brand new business segment is taking shape, with high-grade Simandou iron ore from Guinea being unloaded, crushed and processed directly on site in bonded zones.
The new zero tariff policy will greatly boost the global competitiveness of high-grade Simandou iron ore. It will drive mining, port, and logistics development in Guinea and other African nations, helping them turn resource strengths into sustainable economic growth.
Plans are underway to bring in other African minerals through the Dalian port under the new policy, making the whole import chain far more efficient and cost-effective for both sides.
This zero tariff policy elevates China-Africa cooperation from resource trade to full industrial chain collaboration. We're also expanding stable import routes for Guinea bauxite and optimizes bulk mineral logistics in northern China.
The benefits are reaching downstream manufacturers directly.
Previously, the entire process from ordering, offshore loading and shipping to port arrival took 45 to 60 days. Now high-grade iron ore is readily available at Dalian port, enabling on-demand procurement aligned with real-time production and boosting operational efficiency via reliable spot supply.
I think the point here is it really is now in the hands of Africans to really try our best to export more to China, utilize this opportunity. We need to remember that previously China had been complying with WTO proposals and doing this on a voluntary basis to have duty-free access for low-income countries, but of course the countries with the biggest manufacturing potential are the middle-income countries. So South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, as you mentioned, we really have the biggest opportunity.
The new logistic routes is locking in stable supply for China's steel industry. More importantly, it brings steady trade and development opportunities for African countries. Guanyang, CGTN, Dalian.
I want to discuss this with Professor John Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. Professor Gong, thank you for joining us on the show. Now, I believe this zero tariff policy it's a win-win cooperation for both sides. How do you think China can benefit from this?
Well, I think China benefits from this for businesses in China for paying lower tariffs. That helps Chinese businesses. And also, I think, China's strategy of applying zero tariffs on even industrialized products produced and made in Africa also helps China in a way that you know, a lot of Chinese business are trying to find places to move to, and you know, operations based in Africa obviously, you know, lowers costs, but also helps the local community as well. You know, Africa needs to industrialize, and it can industrialize from sort of, you know, these products being made from a not so cost sophisticated manufacturing and moving gradually up the value chain ladder. I think it's a win-win situation for both sides. So I think, you know, this is a policy not just benefiting Africa, but also Chinese companies here as well.
Now, how do you think China's market opening can counter, for instance, unilateral tariffs, trade monopolies, and most importantly, what does this tell you about Global South cooperation?
I think you look at the share of China's trade with Africa, for example, out of the total China's trade, and this portion has been steadily increasing. And it's actually quite understandable that you know, Chinese exports have been subject to a lot of protectionist control from the United States, for example, from European Union. Relatively speaking, you know, Chinese companies have been quite successful in developing countries, and they should be actually, right? And you know, by operating in these countries, by creating business in these countries, it helps develop the economy over there, but also helps with the problem here in China, where we have a rising salary, rising wage level, rising cost of doing business. This is the very similar pattern we saw you know, many years ago, several decades ago, when American companies moved to China and they produce products and export back to the United States. Now, you know, China is at the other end of the table. We're actually having a lot of companies going to Africa, making things over there, and import it back to China. So I think it's a very similar model, and we can understand that China in that process benefited immensely. Our country is totally industrialized to the extent of even leading in several industries in terms of innovation, in terms of cranking out the best and wonderful products. And Africa is merely doing the similar thing. I think there's a prospect of a similar kind of economic prospect in the future for African countries.
Professor Gong, it's always good to get your perspectives. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, in China's booming live stream market, a young Ethiopian woman stands out from the mostly local influences. Sion Dereje sells coffee imported from her homeland as a part-time live streamer here in Beijing. And here's what she has to say about the zero tariff policy.
Chinese consumers are very willing to pay for origin of and high quality. And then what moves to the most is sense of connections. Many farms comment so Ethiopia is birds of coffee, we know that. And then sometimes they say, thank you, Jeonju, for bringing such authentic beans in those moments. I feel like I'm not just like selling coffee. I'm building like a bridge, or through a cup of coffee curve, Chinese people get a taste. It means our agriculture products like coffee, beans, and then seeds in the inside of Chinese markets. Chinese consumer can enjoy authentic Ethiopian coffee at lower costs. And then while Ethiopian farmers gain more stable incomes, children can go to school, and village can build roads, as coffee is band philosophy says, like children from the source of the fine coffee, crafting moment of happiness.
And that's all for this edition of Global South Voices. I'm Kasturi Manikam. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.